Hi everybody, I'm Dave Thomas, and this time I am building the Quest Antari model rocket. This is one of their skill level 1 kits, and this can go together and be ready to fly within just a few hours. So as with all of these, let's open it up and make sure we have all of our parts. And if you've ever built some of Quest's other beginner's kits like the Starhawk, this is going to be really similar. Alright, so we'll get to the instructions here, and upon opening them, a lot of the small parts are within the instruction sheets here. So be careful that you don't lose these. Alright, so there's our streamer, 2 shock cords, 1 Kevlar, 1 elastic. A little streamer mount there and some decals. Alright, so here's our actual instruction package here with the parts list. Alright, so we found the small parts there. Here's our main body tube, our fin assembly adapter. Alright, nose cone, there's the main piece, and then we've got a base piece for that, and then we've got some other little parts in here. Be careful you don't lose them. Okay, so we've got an engine clip, a launch lug, an engine block, and what's this little ring here? Okay, this is the motor clip retainer ring. Alright, so it looks like we have everything, and we can go ahead and get started here with the nose cone. So I'm just going to move this stuff over a little bit. Alright, so for the nose cone, you're going to need some plastic model cement. The tube type will work best. If you're using a brush-on type, you may have to use a fairly heavy application of it. With the tube type, we can just run a bead right along the inside here. This is a fairly thick nose cone too. Nice and robust. Okay, and then this base piece just fits right into there. Okay, and just hold that for a couple of seconds and then set that aside. Next we're going to assemble the shock cords here, and so first we need to take them apart. Kind of wrapped around each other here. So we've got one that is tubular elastic, and then one that's Kevlar here. Okay, and the first thing we're going to do is tie an overhand knot, shown here, leaving about an inch on the free end there. Okay, so I'm going to just tie that over like that. Okay, try and keep them as close as possible there, and then just pull those taut. Okay, and then they recommend putting a little bit of white glue on here. You can also use wood glue just to keep them from fraying. Just a little touch there, a little touch there, and I do the same thing here on the knot itself. Whoa, that's a lot. Not quite that much. All right, and I'm just going to work that into the knot there so it does not unravel during flight. Okay, and then we can just take a tissue and just kind of blot off the excess there. Okay, and then the Kevlar end is going to attach to the engine block. And this is a lot different from other kits like those you'd find made by Estes or by Custom Rockets, which use kind of the standard glue-on patch. Here, by having this on the engine ring, or the engine block ring here, all right, we can just tie this down, and this is all I show, is just an overhand knot here, and then you pull it up so that it's right above that. Okay. Now something else you can do with this, if you want to do a little bit of preparation beforehand, is take your hobby knife and cut a little notch in the outside of that engine block ring. Okay, and that's just going to give a little groove there now for this to fit in, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to install. Okay, so once again here I've got my overhand knot, and then I'm just going to pull it up just like that. Okay, and then we'll tie another overhand knot there. So we end up with a double knot, but the knot is up on the edge here, not down on the surface of the ring. Okay, and here I like to put a little dab of glue on that as well. Since this is Kevlar, you could use either the white glue or you can use a little bit of super glue here, and that's what I'm going to do, just a little tiny dab there, and it'll soak into that knot. Okay, over here on this free end, you can pretty much ignore it. I am going to cut it off just a little bit so that it's not as long, or not longer than the diameter there, and that's just going to help keep from getting it interfering when we put it in the motor or into the body tube. So I'm just going to cut that back a little bit. And again, you can put super glue or white glue right on the end here to keep it from fraying. Okay, now we have the yellow motor mount tube here. Okay, and so what we're going to do here is stand it next to our engine block or thrust ring. I'm trying to glue my finger, there we go. Okay, and just take a pencil here and mark right where the engine block comes up against the tube, like that. And then using your hobby knife, cut an approximately 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeter slit there. It just needs to be wide enough to accept the engine clip here. And this is actually a little bit narrower than most engine clips. So that's just going to pop right into there. Okay. And now I'm going to kind of leave that as a guide for a moment. Now I'm going to add a little bit of white glue or wood glue. Okay. Now they show putting the glue on the inside here, and normally that's what I would do. But if I do that and then I push the ring in where it's supposed to go, that's going to put glue ahead of it and potentially could push glue so that it is now making a shorter distance for the motor to fit. Okay, usually doesn't happen unless you get a lot of it. That's just something to keep aware of. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and apply my glue to the outside of the thrust ring here. And I use thrust ring and engine block interchangeably. It means the same thing. Okay. Now I'm just going to take my finger and even this stuff out, because I don't want globs anyway. Alright, but now when I put this in, any excess glue will be forced upward instead of downward. Okay. So now I'm going to take it like this so the Kevlar shock cord is facing forward. Alright, I'm just going to leave my clip there as a guide, and now I'm simply going to push this in until it comes to rest against the engine clip there. Okay, wipe off any excess glue. Now it's tending to tilt a little bit there, and that's because the opposite side does not have anything holding it there. So kind of even that out all the way around. And now let this dry completely. Okay, now that my glue has set, I've removed the engine clip so that it's out of my way. And now we're going to glue the yellow tube here into the fin assembly like this. Okay, now we want the slit here to go in between two of the fins. Okay, because once this is glued into place, then we're going to put the engine clip back in like that. Okay, and then the little black ring we had here. Okay, this will go over the base of the fin assembly like this, and it's really snug. Okay, but that'll get glued on there, and then that will make the entire motor mount assembly there. Okay, if you want, you can offset it a little bit. It won't hurt anything there. And if you look on these, on the printed or the imprinted decoration here, some of these have a little line on it, so that's, if you want to go in between the lines, you could do that, so you're not, and that would just be a matter of moving this over. And they got little molded rivets on there too, so if you want to make sure that you can see all the rivets and such, you can simply off-center this just a little bit, okay, and put it on that way. Now, before I glue this in, I just noticed there's some little bits of plastic flash on there that are just going to look ugly. So I'm just going to take my knife and trim those off. You can also use some very fine sandpaper to do this, but I'm trying to not mess up the glossy black finish. So here, if you can cut it off, it's probably going to give you a better finish there. Just make sure you don't cut yourself in the process. Okay. So now I'm going to apply some glue to the inside here. Now again, I want to be careful not to get too much glue in there. And here we're gluing a cardboard piece to a plastic piece. Brush-on type cement will not work very well here. It's too thin and it tends to absorb into the cardboard. You can use the tube type plastic cement, but this is a case where I actually prefer to use a gel type super glue because it's going to be better at gluing two dissimilar types of substances here. So here I have some super glue gel. And even with this, I don't want to get it too heavy because we don't want to have it blocking a motor down there. So I'm just going to put a bead right at the edge here so it's got lots of room to be spread out. Just like that. Okay, now I'm going to look at, I want to see where I want to end up. So I want to be on a face that doesn't have the linear stripe here that this one does. And I'm going to want to end up so that I'm between two of the rivets. So now I'm going to put this in, and I'm just going to wiggle it back and forth a bit here to help spread the glue. And then line that up the way I wanted it. I'm going to go ahead and put my clip back in as a guide. Okay, and that's going to put it between two of the rivets, which is how I want it. Okay, looking up I can see some little beads of cement in there, and I really don't want them there. So I'm going to use a cotton applicator here, just a Q-tip will work as well. I'm just going to smooth those around the seam between the cardboard and the plastic there. Same thing if you've got plastic cement doing the same thing. Smooth that out so you don't have a big lump that might interfere with your motor. Okay. If it still interferes once this is all dry, you can take a little bit of sandpaper or a small file and sand it down later. Okay, now we'll go ahead and put the motor clip back on. Okay, and that's going to go, where'd it go? Here we go. Okay, so that's going to go right here. Alright, and then we're going to put a bead of either plastic cement or gel type super glue around the outside here. And in fact, that's going to be easier if I take this off. Okay, and I am going to use the super glue. Now I think I'll go ahead and use the plastic cement. The super glue would probably make a better bond, but I would probably also glue my fingers to the fin can using it. Alright, and that actually looks a little bit too heavy. A little bit thinner than what I did it there is probably going to be ideal. Okay, so now I'm going to put my clip back on. Okay, and it's okay if the clip goes through the cement there, it's not going to hurt anything. Alright, and now I'm going to take my retaining ring, I'll put that on, and it's going to go through the cement, kind of push it forward. Alright, and then push that all the way up until it meets the fins. And try and keep it as even as possible. You can see all the little spider webs I made there. We'll clean those up after it dries. Okay, so that looks pretty even. Alright, so I'm going to set that aside to let it dry for a few minutes before we go on. Now I'm going to skip ahead here. Before I glue the fin can into the body tube, I'm going to come down here and mark the body tube for the launch lug. And I'm doing that because it's easier to do that before we put fins on it. Okay, so our launch lug needs to be 3 inches from the aft end. And the first thing we need to do is draw a line along the body tube that's going to give us a nice straight line that we can use for alignment. Now they're showing using the edge of a drawer. You can use a door frame. I'm going to use this marking guide that Estes produces because I can fit it under my camera here. Alright, and I know that my launch lug is 1 inch long. It needs to be 3 inches from the base of the tube, the aft end. And in fact, before I do anything else here, I'm on the inside. I'm just going to write aft on here so that I don't get it turned around later. Alright, and then I'm going to take my ruler here, and from the aft end we needed 3 inches. Okay, so there's 3 inches there. If we put our launch lug up there, alright, it's about 1 inch, so it's going to go up to here. So instead of making a line that goes all the way up from the base of the body tube, I'm just going to make one that goes a little bit beyond my 2 marks there. And that's just going to make less erasing later on. Okay, and do this as lightly as you can, otherwise you have to spend more time removing it. Alright, so just like that. Okay, now the reason I did extend it beyond a little ways on each end is so that I'll have something to sight along when I'm putting the launch lug on there. Alright, this next step is optional, but if you have a little bit of fine sandpaper, you can sand right where that launch lug is going to be. Okay, and that's just going to help the glue adhere better. Okay, now since this is pre-colored, you can paint this if you want, but it's actually meant to be white. I'm going to use white glue rather than wood glue simply because that will make it blend in better. So I'm going to take my launch lug here, and my white glue. Okay. Whoa, that white glue is really runny. Alright, so I'm going to even, that's too much glue, and yes, you can have too much glue on here. When putting this on, more glue will actually make it more difficult because it's going to take longer to dry. Now what I'm going to do here initially is, once I've got the glue on my launch lug, I'm just going to set that on the line and I'm going to pull it back off again. Alright, so now I've got some glue on my line and I've got some glue on my launch lug, and I'm going to wait about 30 to 60 seconds and allow this to get tacky. And that's going to help keep it from moving around when I do put it on for permanency there. Okay, now that my glue has gotten a little bit tacky, I can put this back on. Okay, and now I'm going to look straight down, first of all, on the tube and see if I'm lined up on my line. I'm pretty close. Whoops. Not if I bump it. Okay, and then I'm going to sight down the tube and the launch lug and my drawn line should all be in line with each other. And that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to let this dry completely now before we put the fin can on. Now that the motor mount and fin can are dry, we're going to thread both shock cords back down through the motor mount and the fins. Went a little traveling there. It's okay, it's still good. Okay, make sure that does not come loose like it did. Alright, and now this entire assembly is going to fit into the aft end of the body tube here, and I'm going to dry fit this initially. Okay, so it should look something like that, and I'm going to center my launch lug between the two fins that also have the clip on it. Now remember, in my case I put this a little off center, so I'm not going to be directly in line with my launch lug here. But this way the engine hook will be against the launch rod and kind of out of the way. Alright, so we know that that fits, and so here we're going to add a bead of either white glue or wood glue on the inside there. Okay, so here I'm just going to run some inside that. Alright, you can smooth that out with a finger if you need to. Okay, and now I'm going to come back and insert this, and both of these will tend to grab the cardboard, so you kind of want to do this all in one motion as much as you can. Just like that. Okay, and be careful if you rotate this, you may end up putting this off kilter a little bit, so make sure it's rotated as a unit. Mine looks pretty good there. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. Remove the glue from my finger here. Okay, now what I'm doing is looking in, and you probably can't see what I'm seeing here, but I'm looking to make sure I don't have any big globs of glue in there. If I do, they can just dry, but it looks like I got just the right amount. So now I can feed my shock cords back up through the body tube. The hardest part here is getting them past the thrust ring. Okay, but just go ahead and thread that back up. Okay, and pull that through. Alright, so now we're going to attach that little tab here to the streamer. So this is a little plastic piece. It's got a self-stick tab on that, so you're just going to peel that away. And that is going to go just directly onto the streamer here. like this. All right, just squash that on there really well. Okay, and then if the little piece of plastic is still in the round hole there, just pop that out. And then the elastic string, or the elastic shock cord, goes through that hole. And then it rests against the knot and the excess shock cord we had there. So that's actually supposed to do that, and that's why we left this big free end on both of those. And then the other end here, we're going to tie a double knot. Okay, and cinch that down as tight as you can. Okay, pull that from multiple directions so that knot is good and tight. And then here I'm going to add just a little dab of my wood glue or white glue to that knot so it doesn't come undone. And then I'm going to cut this back just a little bit. That's actually just short enough, but I'm going to cut it back anyway. What I don't want to have happen is for the free end here to get caught between the body tube and the shoulder of my nose cone. But I also don't want it to pull through the knot. So about that length, about 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch. And if you want, you can just put a little dab there on the end to keep it from fraying. Okay, and then to put this all together, now I'm just going to do this for storage and so I can work with the rest of it. But if you're prepping this for launch, you'll want to put 2 squares of recovery wadding crumpled up into the body tube first, and then put this on top of it. So to prepare the streamer, you can just keep folding it over itself lengthwise. This is a lot quicker than trying to roll it from one end. Okay, and just keep doing that until you've got a manageable length. And then you can roll up the remainder there. Okay, and then you can simply push in the shock cord. And you can do it all the way down, so I can just run this up till I have just a little bit of shock cord next to the nose cone, and just push the rest of it down inside the body tube. Alright, and then push this in. Okay, now that nose cone should be tight enough that it doesn't just slide out on its own. And one of the things you can do here, make sure all your glue is dry, but once you've got it in, hang it upside down and give it a shake like this. Okay, if it comes out, if it starts edging itself out like that, then just take a little bit of masking tape and apply it to the shoulder. And you don't necessarily have to go all the way around. Start with maybe 1/3 of a circumference or 1/2 a circumference, and then adjust it as needed. Okay, mine's tight enough that it's not coming out on its own. You also might want to make sure that it's not so tight that it won't come out with just a little bit of tension on it. If it's taking a lot, or if you're seeing bulges around here, that usually means you've got part of the shock cord caught in between the shoulder and the body tube. And you want to pull that out and make sure that shock cord is all the way down. Structurally, the last thing we want to do here is add fillets to the launch lug to help strengthen that. You want to do that after it's completely dry, and mine still looks a little bit glossy in there. Okay, but as long as we don't bonk that, we can go ahead and apply the decals here. Okay, now notice this particular version, they have a different colored body tube. You could paint it if you want to look like this. They also have a different fin assembly though. But these decals, as shown here, are meant to go around the base of the body tube, like that. And you can do it that way. You can put them up on the top. You can cut them apart and space them out. You can leave them off entirely. Okay, this is your rocket, and the decals don't add anything to the aerodynamics of it. It'll fly naked. Okay, I think on mine, I'm going to go ahead and put them as shown. Okay. And here I'm actually going to use my launch lug as kind of a guide here. That way if I've got any ugly overlap or it doesn't quite match, you won't see it on the launch pad. Okay, and I'm going to start by just very gently pressing this down and using the fin can as a guide. And this way if I have to come back and pull it back up, it's not going to be really heavily attached. So I'm just a little bit off there. So I can lift that up, and I'm just going to apply a little more tension to it. That's still a little bit off. Alright, this may mean that I need to come all the way back here and just lift that up. This has been really forgiving. A lot of these self-adhesive decals, once they stick, they don't want to come off again. Oh, there we go. Alright, almost, I ain't quite matched there, but that's alright. Like I said, it'll be against the launch rod and nobody's going to see it. And actually part of the reason it's doing that is because with the engine mount here, that's not quite the same diameter down here as it is up here. Okay, so the last thing I need to do, and I'll do this off camera, is to erase the rest of my lines here and then add glue fillets on either side. Looks like I can probably do that here. So I'm going to show you how to do that very quickly. Alright, so here we're just going to add a bead of glue. And here I'm purposely using white glue again so that it matches in with the white parts here. Ooh, that's way too much. Alright. And then I'm going to smooth that out and get rid of the excess. Just like that. Okay. Oh, nope. Alright, that's what you get for being in a hurry. It wasn't quite on there. Alright, so take note of my mistake. And it's one of the problems with wood glue, or with white glue, and one of the reasons I normally use wood glue is it takes longer to dry than the wood glue does. Alright, so I'm going to leave that alone, and I'm going to call this good for the video. Alright, so as soon as that dries, this is ready for launch. So with that, I hope you had a good time building this kit. It goes together fairly easily. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.